Good afternoon, everyone. Would like to welcome you back into session from the recess that we took last Friday, May the 21st, to continue the special called meeting on the special call work session on the budget. And I think we had left on Friday with the procedure being staff would be looking over the budget and coming back to us today with some recommendations. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the first thing to do is go over the nonprofit funding. That really did mean Shannon Eason, my administrative assistant, sat in on that meeting and made the notes. And they sent back a recommendation to you, cut that back to $66,750. And I don't recall what it was originally. I think it was $83,000 originally. So that's a cut of $16,250. So everybody has a copy of that, I believe. That's their recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Okay, Commissioners, I think each of you have a copy of that at your seat. Any questions any of you would like to ask? Now would be the appropriate time to do that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions, well, rather comments. Going down the list, especially on their new recommended or requested budget, I see that Buddy Backpack Program they had cut from their first proposed budget to us. There's also several organizations on here that are either national or international that aren't solely specific to the county. I really would like to express how much I think us being stewards of the taxpayers' dollar should go towards taxpayer or those in this county, instead of us handing out money to an organization that isn't centralized right here in the county. There's also several on here that I know I personally believe carry more weight than others. I kind of feel I'm a little upset that Buddy Backpack is receiving less funds than what was originally presented to us, when that program helps out children who do not have food. In fact, out in Johnsonville, I believe 100% of my students in the schools are on the meal card. Okay. Now, this program was started because kids that were on the meal cards, they realized didn't have food on the weekends. And what they do is they get donations and food together and backpacks, and they hand them out for children who won't have food for that weekend. And I really personally believe that that's a good organization to support, rather than, for instance, no offense, Mr. Johnson, but the Dunn History Museum. There's a couple other things on here, like the Rise and Shine Rescue. I understand animals are a touchy subject, but I'm going to once again state that children and humans, I think, should be coming first before we hand out money to animals. I'm not happy with the way that this came back, especially after their first proposal. I see a lot of things were lined out, a lot of things were cut, and some other things stayed in here that I really don't think deserve or need to be in this budget. That's all I have to say about that.
And I agree totally with what Commissioner Nichol just said.
I'd like to also make one more comment, actually. Sorry. As I stated just a second ago, that we are stewards for the taxpayer money. These are nonprofit organizations that are requesting funds, and this is taken out of taxpayer dollars, which, what is it, 91% of our revenue for the county comes from property taxes? Am I in the ballpark? Possibly?
Is that right?
It's about 68 million.
Okay, what is the average home property tax for the county?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Just for county tax,
Probably around 1,000
Around
to 1,200.
1,000. Okay.
Yeah.
We have many, it's been stated many times that we don't even have the rooftops. The rooftops that we have don't even support enough to put children in the schools.
That's right.
Being a steward for the taxpayers' money, if somebody wanted to donate to the History Museum or any of these other ones on here, the Rescue, South Wake Conservationists, I mean, I know they kind of impact the county, but I mean, I'm like I said, let's focus on Harnett County instead of just handing out this money when taxpayers could go ahead and donate that if they wish. I don't see where we are allotting their money that comes in, that it can be agreed on that we don't even have enough of that coming through to educate our children, let alone the other services that we're trying to nickel and dime for the sheriff's department. So I've watched the board the last 2 years. I've sat in every time that they've done the budget. And I know that nonprofits has always been a contention, and it has been going up, increasing year after year, and it's been stressed that, hey, we got to stop this at some point in time. Seeing where the county is right now financially and discussing that and trying to come up and cut different costs, I don't think we're being proper stewards of the taxpayers' money. Now I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Nickel. Commissioner McCoy?
Commissioner McCoy, may I speak? Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner McCoy?
Okay. Let me say this. All that you said, I can't say that I don't agree with. But when this organization was put together and organized by the county commissioners, it was reaching out to nonprofit organizations that contribute something to the county that the county would not have to bear the expense of. The committee changed this year, and I try to express to them how in the past we have made decisions on who get the nonprofit money. I am proud of the committee because we were asked to go back and review what we had proposed as for the nonprofit organizations. I think they did some extensive cuts, and some of the committee where they disagreed, and where some did agree. But it was done by the committee. And I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of what they have tried to eliminate. And some of these organizations probably didn't deserve it, because for me, I didn't vote on every one of them. I voted on the ones that I feel that contribute something to this county that's not costing this county. Now, my proposal to you, you do what you want to do. But it should come from the committee. It should come from the commissioners. I took my orders from the acting manager, and I'm proud of what the committee did. So, there was some you were questioning that already received their money in the budget. You questioned that, but you didn't know. So, I would say I'm asking the commissioners to approve this. If you want to make changes for next year. And that's all I have to say. I know there's a lot of money that we need, and we're reaching and trying to find money to justify some of the things that you all want, and some of the things that are needed in this county. I agree with that. I don't have a problem with that. None whatsoever. But the commissioners, all of us, make decisions based on the needs of this county, not based on our personal needs. And I'm through with it.
Thank you, Commissioner McCoy.
I have a question,
Any
Mr.
further comments?
I have a question,
Mr.
Mr.
Nick-
Chairman.
Commissioner Weatherspoon, excuse me.
Under the Harnett County policy for funding nonprofits, it says that each organization will provide articles of incorporation. Has that been done? It also says organizations must provide mission statement along with goals and objectives, as well as an organizational chart. Do we have that? It also further in here says, applications must state community need for the organization's services. Do we have that? Application must state how the requested funds would be used. Awarded funds may only be used for services provided to the public by the requesting organization and may not be used for general operating expenses or capital improvements. And I know right here, there's some of these that say they're being used for capital improvements. Why are we funding those?
Well, I will answer that for you. Mr. Johnson, you was on that committee too as well. That was all brought up yesterday, and I think that the person that presides over this committee, it was questioned by the committee. The question was given to her. And I agree with you that you got to do a better job of streamlining these organizations. But we did what you asked us to do. And so it is what it is.
If we're not going to follow the policy, then we need to either get rid of it or redo it.
Well, we've already discussed reorganizing and redesigning the policy.
Yes, sir.
If I may just make a comment, at least regarding the capital improvements. So starting, I believe it was last year, 2 years ago, we started making assigned contracts for all this, and in there it does say that it can be used for those times, that the funds can be used for that, so if it's, I just want to point out, if it's approved that way, the way the contract's written, they can't work that way, because we have to make sure in the contract it says can be used for the capital improvements. So I just want to make the board aware of that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chris, you're saying that the contract does or does not?
It does, it specifically, the contract specifically say it cannot be used for capital improvement.
Okay.
It has to be used for the services that they're
Right.
created to provide.
Okay.
So that's one thing. So it was voted on in the committee to provide funding for that, for the contract, that won't be able to work out. So either they will not be able to get the funding, or they
Okay.
have to use it for something, for the service that they provide.
Okay.
That's totally true. It is true. And we tried to abide by that agreement as much as we could. So that's all I got to say about it.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I would like to take this time to thank Commissioner McCoy and Commissioner Johnson and all those who served on the committee for their hard work in coming to this point with the request for the nonprofit funding. I can only imagine how tough a task that would be to look at worthy groups who do a lot of good for our citizens in this county and try to determine who to include and who not to include and how much to include, if any. I do agree with Mr. Nickel. I do have reservations about using taxpayer money that's been levied on our citizens to give to nonprofits. I would much prefer to see our communities, our civic groups, religious groups, et cetera, that we have in the county to step up and help these organizations as needed. However, having served on several nonprofit committee boards over the years, I also know that once a certain funding avenue has been discovered, that likelihood of receiving those funds for the next budget year almost always results in those funds being counted upon to do whatever the purpose or the reason that group exists for, to do those things. So I am sure at this point in the process that we probably have most, if not all of these groups who have counted on some sort of support from the county. So that leaves us where we are today. I understand the sentiment on both sides. At the same time, we did not give our committee a ceiling amount to work with. We asked them to go back and look at this again when the amount was considerably higher than what was given last year. And I believe this figure that they brought forth today was within what? $2,500, $3,000 of what was given last year? Ms. McFadden, do you have that figure?
Last year it was
63 something?
63,500.
Yep.
65.
65,
Right. And I think if we want to discuss down the road, finding a cap for this going forward, reducing that cap over the years to get to zero eventually, then I understand that, and that's something that I could support. But I do think at this stage of the game where we are, the work that our committee has put in, I think that's something that we need to take into account as we decide what we're going to do from this point forward. So those would be my comments on the matter. Mr. Wood, do we need to approve this separately?
You don't have to approve it separately, but we wanted to, it was worked on separately, so I just wanted to bring it to your
Sure.
attention first.
So at this time, then, I would ask any that are opposed to this that has been brought back, if they have another proposal they would like to propose at this time, we would be glad to entertain that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment. I'd like some clarification. So based on the precedence that was set of giving to these organizations, that's kind of what you're saying is why we're going to continue with, I guess, providing the funding?
Well, what I'm saying, what my point was that hindsight being 2020, we probably should have, if we wanted to limit this expense, we probably should have given the committee a ceiling and say, you need to stay under this total.
Now, understanding that precedence that was set and how we are going to follow along that, then there are several things on this proposed or this requested budget that were not on the preceding years. And there are also ones that were on the preceding years, for example, the Buddy Backpack, that with this new one that just came back compared to what they gave us last week, they went and cut Buddy Backpack more. So we are not only adding several organizations, we're now adding those and cutting from the preceding years. Now, I don't see how that's fair. Like, if we're going to hold that precedence, then take care of the ones that you have instead of adding more in order to fund those. Or next year we're going to be having several more that come in here, and the ones that are used to getting that money are going to be looking for it, and they're not going to get it. So,
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Commissioner McCoy?
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Nichols, and it is true what you're saying. But no one gave us a seal limit. And in our last meeting last year, we asked our attorney to review it and see if in our bylaws, if there was a seal limit. There wasn't a seal limit. And as far as Buddy Backpack, yes, the committee did streamline Buddy Backpack, but the committee streamlined more than just Buddy Backpack. You asked us to reduce the figure that we had already came up with, and that's what we did. No one wanted to cut Buddy Backpack because I think it's a very, very important organization, nonprofit organization. I know what they do and what they provide for all the children in all the schools, no matter what color, race, or ethnicity. That's why I feel like it's very important. So I feel like we met our obligation. And as I said in the very beginning, if we're going to make any more changes, we need to concentrate on making those changes and review our bylaws for next year. I feel the committee met their obligation to what you all wanted us to do. And I feel like this is a subject that we should make a motion on it and move forward.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we do not approve this nonprofit funding.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Nichol not to approve the nonprofit funding request that came from the nonprofit committee. Have a second by Commissioner Witherspoon. Any discussion? So I'm hearing a motion to not accept this, and therefore we would not have any nonprofit funding for this year from the Board of Commissioners.
If that's our goal to where we are trying to go, as you stated, then, and if we can't agree on this now and this is what's going on, then yes, sir. I sure do.
Okay, any other comments?
And we can agree on it. The committee made the decision. That's what you asked the committee to do. So what is it that you want us to agree on? I want to be clear about what you asked. We, with the committee, we met yesterday, and we went over all the nonprofit organizations. We made the initial cuts that we thought that we should make, and Buddy Backpack is not the only organization on the list that's in need. So I don't understand what you want. I mean, I understand you wanting changes, but those changes should take place not only for this year, but going forward.
Then if we are cutting certain things, then I'm fine with that. Then go ahead and streamline everything then. However,
We
do not
streamline
add new things on to it and then streamline the ones that are looking forward to the money that you've provided and provided and provided.
Mr. Nichols, let me explain this to you. We did not add those organizations to the list. When Shannon sent out a letter and sent out the notice, and I believe it was February, they made it public. And when she made that notice public, every nonprofit organization in the county have a right to apply. It's up to the committee to streamline what is given out. But we cannot say to these other organizations, you can't apply. In fact, every year that this committee has been organized together, every year we have more and more organizations to apply. That's one of the reasons why I think we were giving out more this year than we normally give out, because we have more organizations that had applied. We have no control over that. All of these organizations are organizations of this county. And all of these organizations are contributing something to this county, a need for the citizens of this county. So I still don't understand what you are saying. Buddy Backpack is not the only organization that received the cut.
What I am saying is that, correct, any nonprofit can apply. The nonprofit committee is the one that decides and then came to us with this. So what I'm saying is, out of everything that applied, and keeping in mind that we set a precedence with paying, for example, Buddy Backpack, $7,000 last year, and now you're cutting them to $5,000. But last year we did not have, let's go through here. Gun History Museum. Ladles of Love was not on there.
weren't on the list last year, but they had a right to apply for it
They
this
sure
year.
did have the right to apply, but you as a committee did not need to come at us with this and then cut other nonprofits.
Is
I
that not
don't.
what you asked us to do?
You, I may
Is
be
that not
sitting.
what you asked us to do? We submitted our proposal, and you asked us to cut it. So we did the best that we could in cutting it back. We couldn't make a decision for one organization.
Well, I can't speak for the voters in District 1, but the voters in District 4, they elected me to be a good steward of their tax dollars.
And that's what I'm
And
here
this
for.
is not being a good steward of tax dollars.
Amen.
There's pork barrel money in here,
Well,
and I'm opposed to
I'm
that.
not gonna argue the point anymore. You all just make the decision and do what you wanna do. I mean, it's not for me. It's not going in my pocket. I'm just trying to serve not only District 1, but District 4, District 3, District 2, and District 5. I don't represent just one district. I represent all the citizens here in this county. It doesn't matter to me what the organizations come out, what district the organization come out of. And I am a good steward of all the citizens' money, taxpayers' money.
Any further comments by anyone? Okay, this time we will vote on the motion. Again, that motion is to not accept the recommendation from the nonprofit committee. Mr. Nickel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Witherspoon?
Yes.
Ms. McCoy?
No,
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Wood, would you like to go over the other things that you and your staff worked on?
Yes, sir. We divided, as you see on this sheet, we divided it into Part 1 and Part 2. And I'm going to ask the budget officer, the budget director to go through Part 1 because I was not involved in this. But these are things y'all had already agreed to at your previous work sessions that you would make changes in the budget on. And then I'm going to handle Part 2, which is where we're trying to come up with the money for the law enforcement officers for the sheriff's request. So Lisa, with that, if you'll take over on Part 1, please.
Okay, so for $20,000, these were some corrections we had to do. $20,000 from contingency to economic development. It was for the strategic plan. We moved the clerk's position from the county manager's budget to the governing board's budget. There was when we were doing our salary and benefit projections, there was an issue, there was an error of $85,000, I'm sorry, $404. And then there was also an error in the contract positions for the appointed board members for tax. So we had to increase that.
So the 85,000 was a decrease.
That was a decrease.
And the other was an increase. So we're actually 65,000 better off with
Correct.
that. Okay.
And I'm going to jump down for the expansion budget. There was a typo in one of the vehicle requests from Harnett Regional Water. And so we went ahead and made that correction there, and we had to decrease the capital outlay, and then we decreased the revenues for Harnett Regional Water. In the continuation budget, when we hire the clerk, it's going to come in at a higher grade than what the previous clerk was. So we're going to move that increase from the county manager's, or we had to increase the governing board's budget. In the expansion budget for Harnett Regional Jetport, we took the spreadsheets that we got from Barry for general services, and we made those adjustments in the Board of Expansions.
And
I'll be happy to
that
answer
was
any
primarily
questions.
to, as I recall, that's to do the fuel, buying the fuel and reselling the
That
fuel.
is for Harnett taking over the Jetport.
Right.
All the costs and the revenues that were projected.
Okay. So those were all of the things that y'all had previously discussed at your work sessions. Prior to the discussion at the last work session was where we talked about the sheriff. So I wanted her to go over all of those and just kind of refresh your memory that those were the changes thus far. So now we get to the issue on the sheriff's request. As y'all recall, the sheriff's office is requesting to reclassify all sworn deputies by 2 pay grades. And your pay grades are 5%. So this would be 10%, okay? And again, I want to stress, I want to make clear what we're doing here. You know, there's 2 ways to go up on salaries. One is to move somebody along, further along in the steps, but they stay in the same pay grade. That would not solve his problem, because our problem is when we go to hire an entry-level deputy, your pay grade would still be way down at the 36.9 step instead of taking it up like we want by 10%. So what we've got to do is adjust the pay grades. So those jobs, for instance, if they're on a grade 107 now, they would go to grade 109, which is 2 steps, and that gives it. You're basically taking all of your LEOs, your law enforcement officers. It doesn't include jailers, doesn't include the clerical people. And as you recall, you gave the jailers an increase, I believe, last year. But what it does is every position where it's a sworn officer, from entry-level deputy sheriff to a corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, on up, captain, major on up, those grades would change by 2 grades. And therefore, when somebody goes to be hired, they're starting at 10% higher than where they're at now. Same thing with promotions. Everybody basically is going up. They'll be at the same step they're at, but they'll be on that higher grade. So have I explained that adequately? Okay. So what we were looking at then, we're looking for $731,506. The sheriff, as I told you at the last meeting, has agreed to put $171,360. He will pay out of the forfeiture fund for this 1 year only. It's not something, you know, that you could dip into every year, but for this 1 year only, he would do $360, and that would buy 6 of the vehicles which we were planning to do. So there's $171,360. You'll see the math right below my notes there. You start off with the requested amount. We reduce it by $171,360. And again, where those cars will be paid for is out of his forfeiture fund. And so we would adjust that budget to increase the expenditures from there, and it would come out of that fund balance. The second number is $232,514 in cuts to the recommended budget. And if you do that, and I'm going to walk through those, they're listed below. If you're in agreement with those, then we would need to appropriate fund balance of $327,632, and that would give us the $731 that we need for their pay increase. So having said that, we now go to the items which we are proposing to you to look at cutting. Some of these we talked a little bit about at the last meeting. Some of them are add-ons, so I wanted to go through that with you. $10,250. This is the Community Development Home Repair Program. I'm not saying it's not a good program, but it's brand new. And so it's not like we're cutting an existing program. And so I would recommend that we not start that program at this point. The second one is a part-time communication specialist position, only fund for 3 months. I would not do that. I would just hold off a year on that and then look at it in the next year's budget. A human resources analyst position, I've had a detailed discussion with the HR director on that. I think the position may be necessary, but again, we're not in a position to fund all of this stuff. There was I think 20-something positions. that were to be funded in this budget as it existed. So I'm recommending that you cut that. This is not cutting an existing position. This would have been something new. Okay, facilities maintenance technician position, again, that was going to be a new position, and that was for a half year, I believe. So I'm recommending you just cut that out, and if they need the position, if you determine in next year's budget they need it, then you can look at it at that point. Then in animal services, administrative support specialist, I believe they want to take that up from half to full-time.
No, that was new.
That was a new, and so I don't recommend that you add a new position on that. Soil and water office assistant position, I'm recommending that remain part-time. I think that's the one they wanted to take up. Okay. And then in DSS, I believe they had 5 or 6 position requests. They had a request in here for 2 DSS social worker 3s for foster care. I'm recommending you hire 1 and cut 1 of them. And then DSS social services, there's an assistant position. I'm recommending you cut that. And this last position for $34,885 is Parks and Recreation Administrative Assistant, remain part-time. Now on that one, I will tell you, I'm a little bit on the bubble on that one. And the reason is, as you come in here and, if y'all have the swipe card, there's a young lady who sits out there in Parks and Rec with the glass enclosure that lets people in and out. And so she lets the public in and out, and that's the access point for the manager's office, budget office, finance, and all that on the second floor. So in thinking through that a little bit more, right now, we've only got that covered for part-time. Now, my original thought was you have some people who volunteer downstairs as you come in that are just kind of directing people where to go. And my original thought was, well, if we're tight on money, we could ask those volunteers to move up here when she's out and have it covered that way. And that's what I was trying to do. But I guess what I'm saying is, if we have some extra money, you may want to give some thought to possibly moving that to a full-time slot.
Well, Mr. Wood, if I might interrupt you, I would say that I would be in favor of making that a full-time position. I would hate for the people of Harnett County to have finance this nice new building, and that we have a part of this building that if there's not anybody there to let them in, they won't be able to get in to use part of that or to see whomever they need to see.
Right.
So I would be supportive of leaving that in the budget.
Okay. Well,
That's my opinion.
Okay. And so I would like, before y'all leave today, hopefully what we're going to do is try to get an okay on what you'd like to include or not, because the plan is, and of course it's subject to what you want to do. We just have to have a budget adopted by June 30th, as y'all know by state law. But our plan is, if y'all can come to some sort of consensus today, I know you can't legally vote on the budget today, but if we can get a sense of where you're going with it, then we can prepare the budget ordinance to include as much of this as you want, or we can simply have it like this, leave it like this, and come back on the 7th and say, we recommend that you approve the budget as recommended, subject to the following changes. And then y'all could go through this list and say, I'm in favor of this. And I don't think you have to take every one of them, but you just have to talk about the ones you don't want to take out. Does that make sense?
Well, who makes the list?
I'm sorry?
You said you're gonna provide us with a list?
Well, this is the list here.
Okay.
And so what we would do is have Chris prepare the ordinance.
Okay.
So you do it, excuse me, okay. You do say grace over it, don't you? Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure the attorneys eyeballed it, okay. So we would prepare it, and then how I've done it in other jurisdictions is we leave it as the manager recommended it, but then we come in and say, the motion that we would give you is a motion to adopt the ordinance as presented originally by the county manager, subject to the following changes. And then that's any change you vote for. And this is the list of what we're asking you to make changes on. And the only one I think that's up in the air right now is this last one, this Parks and Recreation Administrative position. That's the young lady we were talking about meeting people.
I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, I'd like
Yes,
to
sir.
make a
Commissioner
statement as well as a recommendation. As far as the DSS position is concerned, I know that you had a meeting with them this morning talking about that and,
Yeah.
and a couple other things, the Traverse program. Currently, we have last month 176 children in custody, foster care, okay? The amount of social workers that they have for that position is currently covering one social worker for 30 children, okay? And that's even going along with what they have requested, it'll, without any cuts, that brings it down to 1 for 22. The state compliance is 1 social worker for 15 children. So I would like that to be taken into consideration.
Okay. Now, one thing we can do, and let me throw this out as an option. One of the options we have is on this 731,000, if you're going to add some things back in here like that, what we can do is delay the implementation of that pay increase a month or two, and that cuts back on the total cost of that. And so every month you delay it would roughly cut that by 1/12. So that may be a way, Commissioner Nickel, to come up with that money.
And then another comment also, since we are on the sheriff's budget and kind of, we're trying to do everything that we can in order to appropriate the funds for this raise. Is the sheriff still in his stance that if we do this, that he is for getting at least in-car cameras at the least that he had proposed?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't add that in here
Okay.
because he had committed to that. That's another, what was it, $270,000 out of that asset forfeiture. He would do the in-car cameras, yes,
Better than nothing at this point.
right, right. I should have had that on here.
So Commissioner Nickel, just for my clarification, the DSS position you were talking about is the last one on the page, DSS Social Worker 3, foster care position?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
They were asking for, I believe, 4 total. It was 4 in the beginning, and then it was cut down to 2.
Yeah,
So even if they were given that 4, that would still not drop them down to whatever the compliance is for the state.
but so what are you requesting, one more, or? I took it from 2 to 1. That's a savings of 26,000, because that's not gonna cover, that's gotta be for a part year.
That's partially reimbursed by the.
Oh, that's right, it's
Yeah,
partially reimbursed by
correct.
the state,
But yeah, we get 50% reimbursement
That's
for each
right.
position,
from the
correct?
state, that's right. Well, with what you did on the nonprofit funding, you've got $66,750. So you could pick up this social worker job, and then if you want to look at taking care of the administrative assistant job out here, I think you'd have enough money to do both.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the least, let's try and fund that just because,
Okay,
especially with COVID and everything that's happened,
yeah,
and being short-staffed as it is with different COVID issues and whatnot, having to keep up with their mandatory meetings and touching
Right.
base, it's kind of imperative to have.
okay.
DSS definitely has been hit hard. I don't know if you sat down and heard some of the figures that have gone through with just food stamps alone. That's pretty much almost doubled
Yeah.
in the last several months, and that they're being stretched thin over there. And I personally just want to be in compliance with whatever that they're supposed to be at. If it's 1 to 15, then let's look at how we can get there. So,
Okay.
And I'm fine with that as well.
Could I kind of get a
I agree
feel
with
from the others?
I agree with that.
Okay, so Lisa, if you'll make a note of that, we're going to change that to
Mr. McCoy, you
say,
okay with that?
we're going to strike out that
Johnson,
cut.
you okay?
So that would go to the original two proposed in the manager.
Right, so
Yeah,
we're
from
taking
the
out
managers,
26,939
yeah,
of cuts.
take what we can now.
Okay. Now, could I get a little bit of consensus about this Parks and Rec Administrative Assistant position? Because that's the one I was on the bubble about, and we've had some discussion about when people come here, can they get in there, get back to see us?
I agree with that. I agree with funding that position.
Okay.
I agree as
Yeah, I
well.
do too.
Ms.
I
McCoy?
agree.
Okay, and I know the chairman did, Mark. Okay, so cut that one as well. I think those are the only two, unless y'all got anything else you want to talk about. Oh, yeah, the one we haven't talked about yet, it doesn't affect the general fund, so it doesn't affect what we're looking for the sheriff. There's one more, the last one on Harnett Regional Water. Lisa set up a meeting with me with the fleet manager and the chief mechanic. We went through the details on each one. I'm comfortable with the request they have except for one. And that is, I'm recommending you cut 28,500. It's a sport utility vehicle at the wastewater treatment plant. It's only got 110,000 miles. And the chief mechanic told me he's not having any major problems with it. So I think we can get another year or two out of that. So I would recommend you cut that. But again, that does not affect the general fund. That's out of Harnett Regional Water's budget. And with that, Lisa, I believe that's all the cuts we were looking at. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate your work in going through and identifying those items.
Okay.
Commissioners, any comments or questions on this or anything else pertaining to the budget? So am I hearing nothing today, at least for the time being? I think with the exception of the DSS Social Worker 3 foster care position at the bottom of the first page and the Park and Recreation Administrative Assistant position, which is the second bullet on the back page.
Right.
That, is everyone agreeable with these suggestions from Mr. Wood?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I agree.
Okay. So
Okay.
we've got head nods or yes from everybody at this point.
Okay.
So,
Well, we know how to prepare it, and
Okay.
I think what we'll come with you is we'll make those corrections on this list, and we'll just come to you with a motion to adopt the budget as presented, subject to these changes. And that'll be, I think, the easiest way to handle it. Okay. Well, thank y'all very much, and I'd really like to thank Lisa. She's put in a lot of work on a very short time frame, I might
I'm
add.
sure. Thank you,
to get
Lisa.
this done.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no further comments, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichol. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Boy, I think you and Matt are going to meet. If y'all can give me 10 minutes.